Welcome to this podcast issue of Darwin Today from Research Councils UK. I'm Jeremy Pritchard from the University of Birmingham. In this podcast issue, we'll be considering the impact of human species on other organisms and asking the question, does it matter? Today at the moment, there is a rich diversity of life on the planet. Between 5 and 30 million species are thought to exist. However, there were once thought to be between 2 and 5 billion different species on the planet. Scientists are proposing at least 5 different extinction events, some of which got rid of up to 95% of the organisms on the planet. The causes of these mass extinctions ranged from volcanic eruptions and asteroid impacts. The current mass extinction, which some people think is going on at the present, is thought to be caused by humans, you and me. So we're losing the diversity of living things right across the planet. The question is, does this matter?
So why is biodiversity important, and why are biologists concerned that we might be losing it? Well, there are various reasons, but probably 2 very compelling reasons that we should be protecting and looking after it is communities and ecosystems that have large numbers of species, so there's a lot of biodiversity, appear to be better at responding and appear to be better buffered against environmental change, including climate change, than those ecosystems with fewer species. Secondly, biodiversity and ecosystems provide humans with a wide range of services. For example, clean air from forests, clean water, etc. If we destroy ecosystems by stripping out various bits of biodiversity, this may well have consequences on things like air quality and water quality and things that humans rely on.
Clearly, the loss of biodiversity can have huge effects. But maybe the loss of some species provides space for other species, allowing them to evolve in their place. Andy Purvis tells us more.
Well, there are 3 problems with that idea. The first is that people are now taking a lot of the planet's resources for themselves, and that means that there's just less food, less energy available for these species. So at the moment, people are probably already taking between 1/3 and 1/2 of the food that's available, and that leaves less for other species. So the energetics of it mean that there simply may not be enough for quite as many new species as we might hope. The second problem is that whereas it takes only a generation to wipe a species out, forming a new one through evolution takes a million years or so, maybe several million. And after a big pulse of extinction, we've seen in the fossil record that it can take 10 to 30 million years before biodiversity levels are back to what they had been before. And then the third problem is that quantity and quality may not be the same thing. So if new species do evolve, we'll probably find that they're weeds, rather than the really interesting, charismatic, beautiful and inspiring species that we're wiping out.
It's not only the direct effects of humans, such as habitat destruction, that affect species. The vast majority of scientists now believe that climate change is caused by humans. But how is changes in the climate going to affect species other than humans? Tim Coulson from Imperial College London tells us more.
Population biologists have long been interested in evolutionary change, and they have a good understanding of how it works. Within a population, there will be variation for a specific characteristic of a trait. These characteristics are often called phenotypic traits. So, for example, body size. And you can imagine that well in humans. If you look at a population of humans, you see there's a large amount of variation for something like body size. And many of these traits in natural populations actually have a genetic component. So this means that relatives are more likely to have similar values of that characteristic than non-relatives. Populations are then subjected to some sort of environmental variation. So perhaps one year they have good weather, another year they have bad weather. And what this does, it can select for individuals that are better equipped, given that trait value, perhaps they're big animals or small animals, to survive and successfully reproduce given that environment they experience. So as we change the environment with things like climate change, we may well see an evolutionary response. And what this means is we will select for individuals with specific values of that characteristic. So small individuals, large individuals, individuals that are good at migrating, individuals that are less good at migrating, individuals that are better foraging than others. And once we select for those individuals, then this will lead to evolutionary change if the trait has a genetic component. So as we change the climate, we may well select for individuals that are better able to cope with perhaps warmer environments, drier environments, or even environments that fluctuate, i.e. are more variable than they are now from one year to the next. And we're seeing growing evidence that species are responding to the changes in the climate that we're causing by increasing levels of carbon dioxide. And of course, these changes won't necessarily influence just one species, but could influence the way that whole ecosystems and whole communities of animals change. So, for example, if one species starts evolving or adapting to its environment in one way, there could be knock-on effects throughout ecosystems. A case in point comes perhaps from puffins in the North Atlantic. Climate change has led to warming of the North Atlantic, and this has seen pipefish, a species very similar to seahorses, move further north. Their numbers are now quite high in certain parts of the North Atlantic. Puffins have been catching these fish, which are not particularly nutritious, and they're rather bony and rather long. And these fish are actually hard for adult puffins to feed on their young. And because of this, we've actually seen major declines in the success of puffins and fledgling chicks. Although we're yet to see an evolutionary response, when you actually change food availability and prey bases, there's good evidence from other species that this could indeed lead to evolutionary changes. Predicting these changes is, of course, hard, but scientists are now starting to develop methods that allow these predictions to be made. And more, population biologists are working with meteorologists to come up with predictions of how we will expect not only our ecological environment, but also the evolution of species to change. So what are the likely consequences of climate change for the evolution of species? Well, it's difficult to know the answer to that and to come up with specific predictions. But one thing I think that is fairly certain is that climate change is leading to the changes in the environment that animals experience. And because animals adapt and evolutionary change occurs when environment change, we can be certain that climate change will leave an evolutionary signature in many species. Predicting exactly what that is non-trivial, but biologists are making good progress at the moment. And certainly we're seeing some evidence of early change, and this is mainly occurring in the timing events throughout the year. Birth dates getting earlier, migrations occurring at slightly different times of the year, migrations stopping, plants flowering earlier, those sorts of things. In the coming years, population biologists are likely to be able to use long-term data sets that they have collected to come up with more accurate and predictions of the evolutionary consequences of climate change that are better than those that they are making now. However, there is a long way to go, but one thing we can be sure of is that climate change will leave an evolutionary signature.
That wraps up this month's podcast. Don't forget, you can learn more about and discuss the effects that humans are having on other species on our website, darwin.rcuk.ac.uk.